This is a quote from my meditation teacher, Swami Veda. The greatest gift you can give the world is a peaceful mind. I think we'd all agree with that. And the question is how? How do we do that? So, what we know about the nervous system is that we respond to grief and loss and threat to other people just as though it's like it's our own, especially when we see video images. So, when we're looking at our nervous systems as a whole during the COVID pandemic, but also just generally over the last several years, our nervous systems have been getting closer to the edge. A lot of people are really stressed. There's a lot of distress. There's a lot of trauma that's unhealed. Brene Brown at one point talked about September 11th in the United States as having triggered a collective PTSD response, post traumatic stress disorder response, in Americans who'd never had that kind of thing happen on their home turf. And so we have these things happen, these large cultural and societal and community shifts are happening, and they have an effect on our nervous system. And because of the rise in video images of other people's trauma, we bring that in, our nervous system brings that in as though it's a threat to us right now. Oftentimes we have such a heartfelt response as well, is that we really feel a lot of empathy and sympathy, and we want to help when there's a flood or a fire or there's something like that going on. And sometimes we jump into action. This can actually really inspire us. If you look at Greta with her school strike and how that's happened and evolved over the last couple of years, and the whole Black Lives Matter movement, where people started to get really in touch with there's something really wrong. People of the global majority skin color and white people as well started to look at that and go, I don't want to live in this kind of a world. And I don't want to live in a world where other people are being hurt in this way. And now what do I do about that? And then there's the communal and very personal experiences that we're having around COVID as well. And so many of us, here where I live in Nova Scotia, it's pretty isolated. We haven't had a lot of COVID. I don't know anyone personally here in Nova Scotia who has gotten COVID and died from COVID. It's interesting just to see how our nervous system works. So, our nervous systems, as they're responding, we become empathetic and we can feel empathetic towards people. And we can also become afraid. Our nervous systems really become hypervigilant for threats that aren't personally dangerous. So, when we watch images of other people experiencing grief, and this is Emma Gonzalez after the Parkland school shooting, we can really feel for her. And might imagine if it was our own child in that, or if our own child had been a survivor and was grieving for their friends, we put ourselves into other people's shoes. And that's something that is helpful. And it can also be overwhelming. We can really get overwhelmed by fear. And so when my teacher was talking about the greatest gift you can give the world is a peaceful mind, and he would say, don't add your own fear into the situation. See if you could stabilize yourself and add a stability, a peace to connect with your own heart, and don't go into a fear response around something that actually isn't a threat to you personally. So, one of the things that we know about hypervigilance and how it evolved in human beings is that it might save us. And so it's hard to convince our system that catastrophic thinking and hypervigilant aren't helpful, because if we were to just think of that one thing and protect ourselves from that, it might save us. In early years when we were evolving in small families and small tribes, it was helpful to have someone in the community who had that overreaction, because maybe one of those times it was true and it would save everybody. So we have this built-in kind of resistance to not going there. We don't really want to be too chill about things because we're not sure. We're not sure if it's actually safe to relax. And one thing that I'm becoming just so much more aware of is that our nervous system is like a history of our trauma and the way we've responded to trauma, fear, overwhelm, difficult circumstances in our past. And so if we have unhealed trauma, we're going to have a level of hypervigilance that's not appropriate for the situation that we're in now. And then because there's so many people in this condition with this heightened level of anxiety and heightened level of hypervigilance, it's catchy. Everybody else is having the same experience more often or more intensely because of that. And on top of the global pandemic and poverty and all the isms, sexism and gender inequality and all of the different things, we have our own personal lives and our own personal stress. So some people have been trying to work at home with young children, and that's very difficult. And we can see now from the statistics that a lot of women, for instance, are shouldering the predominant caregiving. And if you're in that age in your life when you have young children, more likely that you took on the predominant role of caregiving. And now it's really affecting how many women are in the workforce, for instance. And so there's these big societal movements, and then there's the way that we negotiate that ourselves. We might be really too anxious to comfort our own kids. We might be turning to alcohol or other drugs. There's so many people talking about wine got me through COVID, or the COVID extra weight people have. And all of these are just symptoms of there's something going on. And if you're used to getting out in public and down regulating your nervous system through, dinner with friends or being able to see people that you care about, and now you can't do that, then that's going to have an impact on our nervous system as well. And a friend of mine just saw her mom, and she hadn't seen her in 16 months, and her mom's 80. And because they couldn't move between, Nova Scotia and Ontario, where my friend lives, she wasn't able to see her mom in person. So, all of the Zoom calls that we can do and all the ways we can connect aren't a real good substitute for in-person connection. So here we are with all of these circumstances. We get scared and we go into some kind of a survival response. So fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And one thing that we could acknowledge, and maybe it would help to lessen the shame for what kind of a response we go into, is that our experience is what predicts which one we're going to use. So if we're with someone who yells at us all the time and we know that yelling back makes it worse, we're not going to yell back. If we're a kid, they're the adult, they have more of the power, we're probably not going to yell back. If we are with somebody who's yelling at us or who's scary, and then we do yell back and it makes them back off, then maybe we're more likely to do that. A lot of children will go into some kind of a fawning response, trying to make it better, just trying to calm the situation down. So as soon as we notice what's happening, we can notice what's happening in our body as well. And the key to this is that this is neuroception, which is unconscious. So our perception of threat is unconscious, although it's very much based on our past experience. And our response to that threat, so both the perception of threat and the response to threat happen automatically. They happen unconsciously as through our nervous system. So let's stop here and pause for a moment. Notice your feet on the floor or the ground. We were just going through several slides of pictures of floods and COVID and different things. So it's likely that our nervous system is going to be at least a little bit activated. Notice if you're holding your breath. So box breathing is when we breathe in for 4, we hold for 4, we breathe out for 4, and we hold for 4. And if you're feeling like you're kind of at the edge of panic or things are really overwhelming, that's a great exercise to do. And if you're not feeling like it's at kind of that level, then just bring yourself back into softening your belly. Take some deeper breaths. We could give ourselves a butterfly hug. One of the ways to do that is to kind of link our thumbs together and tap lightly with our hands on one side of the chest, the other, just back and forth. We can hold our own hand. We can open our eyes, look around the room, look at the cues of safety. So it's really a foundation of being able to work with our mind is to be able to be present in this moment and to be grounded in this moment. So that's part of why it's really important to have practices that we do of tuning into our body, noticing what's here. So, this is the main part of the inquiry for now. So, let's take a look. Bring to mind someone who's hard to be with. And this is the acknowledging that other people's nervous systems affect our own nervous system. So, if someone around us is anxious, for instance, we're going to pick up on that. And there's a reason for that. It's because if somebody is anxious, maybe there's a reason for their anxiety. Maybe they're right. Maybe there is a threat. So we're gonna review that and have a look and see, well, why is that person anxious? Is there something here that I need to worry about as well? So that's part of the reason why we pick up on people's anxiety. And then if someone's raging at us, it could be that they're in a fight response because of fear. So we might be picking up on fear and the threat that comes along with someone who's yelling at us or raging. So as you're working with this, you might want to use an example of someone in your life that's not a 10 out of 10 in terms of intensity. We're just doing an inquiry, a practice. So bring up images of the person, the events, and really stay aware. What is the sensation in your body? Keep noticing your breath. We're going to work with this for about 10 minutes, so you'll have lots of time to keep coming back. So as you go into it, just really noticing your body and breath, let your mind settle, and then bring forward. And it could be just a person that when you're around them, you notice that it's harder to stay calm, that their anxiety seems kind of catchy. Maybe it's someone you live with. Maybe there's a place that you always meet them. Maybe it's someone at work. But let yourself kind of get into it and really vividly imagine the experience that you have with them. See the look on their face. Maybe it's someone that you talk with on the phone, and it's more the tone of their voice, the kinds of things they're describing. Oh, what if this, or what if that, or you can tell that their breath is quite shallow and anxious. And as you're doing that, as you're letting that come vividly to mind, stay really connected in your body. Notice your feet on the floor. Notice your breath. It takes energy when someone's alarmed or anxious. In order for us not to get dragged into that as well, we have to remain very much aware in our own body and continue to regulate our own nervous system. We can't just kind of relax and enjoy a conversation or enjoy being with somebody when they're really anxious. Either we're going to catch their anxiety and get anxious ourselves. And sometimes people will catastrophic think together. One person will say, well, I'm really worried that this might happen. And the other ones go, oh, yeah, well, what if this happens? That's going to be a catastrophe. And then, so we might be doing that kind of feeding off of each other. So you might notice that might be part of the situation here. Notice if there's any response in your body just to those words. And what you might say, okay, I'm not wanting to go down that rabbit hole. Let's take a deep breath and refocus our conversation. It's not really helpful to go into that level of catastrophic thinking. I'm finding myself getting kind of alarmed or whatever you might say. And then set it aside, come back into regulating your own system. Or when someone else is going into it, when they're going into catastrophic thinking or complaining or raging or something like that, and you're listening, it might be that you're kind of sick of it. Maybe every time you get together, or a lot of the time when you get together, they're so dysregulated that they're not really able to just be present and have fun and to hear you. It's kind of a monologue from their side. And when that happens, you might feel some kind of an urgency to take care of them or help them kind of fix it to feel better. Or you might have an anger response. Like, I'm sick of this. Every time we get together, it's just always more and more complaining, or it's always more of this catastrophic thinking. So it's really important to let ourselves have the response we have. If that resonates with you, with your experience with what you're working with, let's take a couple of minutes to really settle into that. Bring it to mind really vividly. Notice all of your responses, your thoughts, if it affects your breath, what happens in your body. And it's not just that our body might tighten up, it also could be that there's sensations or energy in our body. We might feel like a crushing weight on our shoulders or a tight fist in our gut or something like that. So notice, just scan your body and notice what's going on in my body right now. What's my response in my body? And when I bring that person to mind, when I imagine the look on their face, or I remember all the conversations that we've had and the way it generally goes, what are your thoughts about that? What is your feeling about that? What does it do to your breath? And just keep coming back into regulating your body. Notice your feet, your seat, your breath. And if you feel that you're getting off kilter or you're getting kind of activated, you could always do some tapping on your forehead. You could hold your hands. You could take a break from it, just step back from it. We always need to come back into regulation. And then let's work with a bit of a reverse inquiry for the next few minutes. So it might be something like, It's not my job to fix their nervous system, or it's not my job to help them calm down. And this is interesting because there's a very practical benefit to us if they do calm down, and there's also a cost. So, what comes up in you a lot of the time? These are people that we love, that we have some connection with, maybe, that we have maybe someone in the family or someone we work with, our partner, a child, where we don't want to just get rid of them. And yet they're difficult for us. So, what is our sense of what our job is here? And if you were to say it's not my job, I feel I love them and I can't do this for them. They need to take responsibility for their own nervous system. They're an adult. What's your response to that? And notice your body, notice your breath if you've lost track of your breath. And there's a lot of different responses there. Sometimes there's a really strong pull to help somebody regulate. And that's something that we all do for each other. That often we'll move back and forth, or sometimes it's maybe we have someone that we really care about that's not as regulated as we are. And part of our relationship is they look to us for support and we help them to settle a bit. And if that goes on over and over and over again, we can get kind of tired of that too. It feels like it's only one directional. And one of the things that happens there is that there's a feeling that we don't really have a connection with them because their own nervous system is so hijacked by hypervigilance that they're not really able to be present for us. And so we have a one-way relationship with ultimately is not satisfying. And often when we have those, we will eventually get resentful or we'll leave. We'll set some different kinds of boundaries up, maybe. And that can be very painful for the person who's just feeling really, really panicky or really anxious or is really, really kind of in the thrall of catastrophic thinking. So it's hard. These things are hard. They're not easy for anybody. So in a few minutes, we're going to come back to the group. So let's take a few minutes though before we do. Just kind of scroll through in your mind what happened during the practice. Is there anything that you noticed that was kind of surprising? Sometimes we get so used to the patterns that we have with people, whether we're the one who's anxious and we're always getting reassured from someone, or whether it's the other way around, that we barely see it anymore. It's just the way we are with each other. And sometimes we feel really not capable of regulating our own nervous system. We just feel really overwhelmed and we really need other people's help. And one of the things that's been very difficult about COVID too is that people that we counted on before might also be really struggling right now, and they can't really be there for us the way they used to be. And one of the things that we can see is that there's kind of a narcissism in a sense of not seeing the other person, just in that sense. When somebody's really triggered a lot into their survival responses, we have a feeling that they don't really care about us. And it's not because there's a lack of caring, it's just there's a lack of capacity at the time to be present. So oftentimes they're very disconnected. They're really, really held in the thrall of catastrophic thinking or something. And I know I've certainly had many of those experiences, a lot more in the past than I do now. So how can we honor ourselves and the energy that it takes to regulate ourselves and the regulating that we can help with other people, the co-regulation? And how can we just kind of work with that in a way that's honoring of both of us? And when you were working with that question of it's not my job to take care of someone else, what came up then?